The waiting room smelled like desperation and disinfectant. Clara moved through it like a ghost, taking vitals on a construction worker with a nail through his boot, reassuring a mother whose toddler had swallowed a quarter, applying butterfly bandages to a teenager who'd lost an argument with a skateboard. Simple cases, safe cases, cases that couldn't remind her of what she used to be. Keep your head down, stay invisible. By hour 3, her knee was screaming. She'd learned to ignore pain, real pain, the kind that meant tissue damage and bone fragments, but this chronic ache was different. It was a metronome counting down the hours until she could go home, take her pills, and pretend she'd never worn a uniform. Nurse? The construction worker waved his discharge papers. This says I need to follow up with my primary care. I don't got insurance. Clara pulled up a chair, ignoring the protest in her joint. There's a clinic on 5th Avenue. They work on a sliding scale. She scribbled the address, her handwriting the same efficient print she'd used on field medical reports. Patient stable, evac not required, return to duty, except there was no returning to duty. Not for her, not anymore. The doors burst open. Paramedics wheeled in a gurney at full sprint, their faces tight with controlled panic. Male, 32, motorcycle versus SUV. BP's crashing, 80/40. Pulse thready, suspected internal bleeding. Clara's body reacted before her mind caught up. She was on her feet, moving toward trauma 2, her limp forgotten, her hands already mentally running through the protocol. ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. Cross-match for transfusion, ultrasound for free fluid in the abdomen. If he's got a splenic rupture, he's got maybe 20 minutes before. Holloway. Dr. Prescott's voice cut through her thoughts like a scalpel. He stood blocking the trauma bay entrance, arms crossed. Did I stutter this morning? Waiting room. Doctor, he needs
a trauma surgeon. Which, last I checked, you are not. Prescott turned to Jenkins. Get him on the table. Type and cross for 6 units. Someone page surgery. Clara watched Jenkins fumble with the 4-line, missing the vein twice. The patient's lips were going gray. His systolic was probably down to 70 by now. In 90 seconds he'd be in hemorrhagic shock. In 3 minutes his kidneys would start shutting down. She knew this math. She'd done it in the back of helicopters with missing tail rotors, in field hospitals where the generators failed mid-surgery, in places where the nearest blood bank was a 4-hour flight through active combat zones. Her fingers twitched toward the trauma bay. You're not that person anymore, the voice whispered. You're just a nurse. Just stay invisible. But then she saw it, the subtle distension in the patient's abdomen, the way his breathing had shifted from rapid to shallow. Internal bleeding, massive volume. And Prescott was ordering a CT scan. Doctor, there's no time for imaging. He needs the OR now, or what, Nurse Holloway? Prescott's smile was razor-thin. You'll diagnose him yourself? With your extensive medical training? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. Know your place. You're here because the hospital needs to fill quotas. Don't mistake pity for competence. Something flickered behind Clara's eyes. Something that had nothing to do with hospitals or civilian protocols or staying invisible. For just a moment, she wasn't standing in Seattle General. She was standing in a forward operating base, watching a captain who outranked her try to overrule her medical assessment.
She'd put that captain in his place with 3 sentences in a direct order. But that was Major Holloway. And Major Holloway was dead. Clara stepped back from the trauma bay, her limp suddenly pronounced again, her shoulders curving inward like a flower closing at dusk. Understood, doctor. Behind her, the patient's monitor began to alarm. Clara walked back to the waiting room and tried not to count the seconds until his blood pressure hit 0. The motorcycle victim died at 11:47 a.m. Clara heard the code blue from the waiting room, heard the frantic rhythm of chest compressions, heard Dr. Prescott's clipped voice calling for EPI, for the crash cart, for things that wouldn't matter because he'd wasted 12 minutes on a CT scan instead of getting the patient to surgery. She pressed her fingers against her thigh, counting her breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It wasn't her failure. It wasn't her responsibility. She was just a nurse. Just a nurse. The phrase tasted like copper in her mouth. By noon, the had descended into controlled chaos. A kitchen fire sent in 3 burn victims. A construction site collapse added 4 more. The waiting room swelled to standing room only, and even Prescott couldn't ignore the math anymore. Holloway. He didn't look at her. Trauma 3. GSW to the shoulder. Should be simple enough even for you. Clara moved into the bay where a young man, maybe 25, lay bleeding through a pressure dressing. Gang shooting, 2 blocks away. The bullet had entered just below his clavicle. She gloved up, her hands moving with the efficiency of 10,000 repetitions. Assess the wound, check for exit, evaluate neurovascular status. Her fingers found his radial pulse, strong, steady. No vascular compromise. The bullet had missed the subclavian artery by maybe half an inch. You're lucky, she told him quietly. Another centimeter and you'd have bled out before the ambulance arrived. Dr. Prescott appeared at her shoulder, smelling of expensive cologne and entitlement. What's the assessment? Through and through GSW, no vascular involvement. He needs irrigation, debridement, and antibiotics. I can handle you can handle keeping pressure on it until surgery is available. Prescott lifted the dressing, his examination cursory at best. Though I'm surprised you even know what a subclavian artery is. The patient's eyes flicked between them, recognizing the dynamic, the power differential, the casual cruelty. Clara said nothing. Tell me, Holloway, when you were getting your nursing degree at whatever night school accepted you, did they cover basic anatomy? Or were you too busy checking boxes for the admissions office? Jenkins, working on the next bay over, went rigid. Clara kept her hands steady on the pressure dressing. The patient is stable, doctor. The patient asked you a question. Prescott turned to the young man. She's good at following orders, at least. That's what they teach in the military, isn't it? Just follow orders, don't think too hard. Something shifted in Clara's jaw, a tightening that hadn't been there before. Though I have to wonder what kind of military experience she actually. The doors didn't open. They exploded. The percussion of boot heels on linoleum sounded like gunfire. 4 Marines in full tactical gear burst through the entrance, weapons at low ready, moving with the coordinated precision of a breaching team. The lead man, Captain Thorne, though Clara didn't need to see his rank to recognize command presence, swept the room with eyes that had seen things civilians couldn't imagine. Every conversation stopped. Every monitor seemed to beep in unison. Even Prescott went silent. Thorne's voice carried the weight of mountains. I need Angel 6. Now. The nurse's station erupted in confused murmurs. Jenkins looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the charge nurse. The charge nurse looked at Prescott. Prescott stepped forward, his doctor's coat suddenly seeming like armor. I'm the senior physician on duty. If there's a military medical emergency, I didn't ask for a physician. Thorne's eyes continued scanning the dismissing Prescott like he was furniture. I asked for Angel 6. There's no one here by that name. Perhaps if she's here. Thorne's hand moved to his radio. Intel confirmed. Major Clara Holloway, last known employment Seattle General Hospital, Emergency Department. The silence that followed could have stopped hearts. Every eye in the turned toward the woman in faded scrubs standing in Trauma 3, her hands still pressed against a gunshot wound, her face completely blank. Turned toward the invisible nurse. Turned toward Clara, and Dr. Adrian Prescott's face went the color of old snow. Clara's hands didn't shake as she transferred the pressure dressing to Jenkins. Maintain direct pressure. He'll need surgery within the hour, but he's stable. Her voice was different now. Flatter, colder, the voice of someone who'd given orders in places where hesitation meant body bags. She turned to face Captain Thorne, and something in her posture changed, spine straightening, shoulders squaring, the limp vanishing like it had never existed. The transformation took less than 3 seconds. The hunched, invisible nurse evaporated, and in her place stood someone who'd earned their call sign in blood. Captain. Not a question, a statement. Sit representative. Thorne's expression shifted, relief, respect, urgency colliding. Marine Osprey down in the Cascades, 90 miles northeast. 8 souls on board including Commander Ricks. Heavy enemy contact. We've got a combat medic on site, but he's requesting surgical support. Specifically requesting you, ma'am. The had gone silent enough to hear the IV drips. Injuries? Clara was already moving, her hands stripping off the contaminated gloves, her mind shifting into a gear these people had never seen. Penetrating chest trauma, suspected hemothorax. Possible spinal involvement. The medic can't stabilize him for transport. Thorne's jaw tightened. He's got maybe 2 hours. And we're taking fire from mercenaries trying to secure the wreck. Mercenaries. Clara's voice went flint hard. What was the Osprey carrying? That's classified, ma'am. Captain, If I'm fast roping into a hot LZ to perform field surgery, classification is a luxury we don't have. Thorne glanced at his men, then back. Encrypted intel drives. High-value targets want them badly enough to shoot down a marine aircraft. Clara processed this in the time it took her heart to beat twice. Chest trauma, hostile environment, classified material, the kind of mission where failure meant more than one death, meant compromised national security, meant giving America's enemies a win. She turned to the supply room. Dr. Prescott finally found his voice. Wait, what is happening? Holloway, you can't just leave in the middle of a shift. You're needed here. No. Clara didn't look at him. She was pulling supplies now, chest tubes, hemostats, clamps, shoving them into a tactical medical pack with the efficiency of muscle memory. I was never needed here. I was tolerated here. You're a nurse. You don't have the authority to. She stopped, turned, and when she looked at Prescott, he actually stepped backward. Major Clara Holloway, Combat Surgical Team Alpha, 75th Ranger Regiment. Her voice could have cut steel. Johns Hopkins, full academic scholarship. 4 combat deployments, 73 field surgeries with a 96% survival rate in conditions you couldn't imagine in your worst nightmares. She took a step forward. Prescott took one back. That motorcycle victim this morning? Ruptured spleen, grade 4. I could have diagnosed it in 30 seconds and had him in the OR before his pressure crashed. But you needed a CT scan because you were too insecure to trust the assessment of someone who doesn't look like you. The was a tableau of frozen bodies and open mouths. He died because of your ego, doctor. And you're going to have to live with that. She zipped the medical pack, slung it over her shoulder, and turned back to Thorne. Rules of engagement? Return fire authorized. Deadly force authorized. Good. She nodded to his sidearm. I'll need a weapon. Thorne didn't hesitate. He pulled a Sig Sauer from his tactical vest and handed it to her grip first. Clara checked the chamber with movements so practiced they looked like breathing. Jenkins whispered, "Oh my God." Clara looked at her fellow nurses, people she'd worked beside for 4 years, people who'd watched her be diminished and never said a word. Someone finish with the GSW in Trauma 3. And someone tell Dr. Prescott how to actually read an abdominal ultrasound. She walked toward the exit, her gait steady and strong, no trace of the limp that had defined her civilian existence. Behind her, Prescott's voice cracked. You can't just, you're abandoning your post. Clara stopped at the door, looked back over her shoulder. I'm going back to my real post, doctor. Try not to kill anyone else while I'm gone. The rotor wash hit her like coming home. Blackhawk's interior smelled like gunpowder, hydraulic fluid, and purpose. Clara strapped into the jump seat between 2 Marines whose names she didn't need, Sergeant Chen and Corporal Davies, based on their rank insignia. They'd introduced themselves with nods. No words necessary. She was checking her medical pack for the 3rd time when the pilot's voice crackled through the headset Thorne handed her. Angel 6, this is RAZOR1. Flight time 42 minutes. Weather's deteriorating fast. We've got whiteout conditions at the target site. Copy that, RAZOR1. The words came automatically, muscle memory from a life she'd tried to bury. What's the tactical picture? Thorne leaned forward, unfolding a tablet with satellite imagery. Osprey went down in an area locals call the Devil's Throat, a box canyon, steep walls, single entry point. Hostile forces have the high ground, here and here. He indicated positions with a gloved finger. We're inserting via fast rope because there's no LZ. You'll drop straight into the kill zone. Clara studied the terrain with eyes that had read 100 tactical maps in 100 briefings. The canyon was a natural ambush site. Whoever had planned this downing knew exactly what they were doing. The medic on site. What's his experience level? Corporal Hayes. 2 deployments, solid under fire. But he's asking for you specifically because Commander Ricks is. Thorne hesitated. He was your CO in Kandahar, ma'am. The name hit like a fist to her solar plexus. Ricks. Commander Daniel Ricks, who'd pinned her Major's oak leaves on at Fob Salerno. Who'd written her Distinguished Service Cross citation in his own hand. Who'd held her in the hospital after they'd pulled the shrapnel from her knee and told her she was the finest surgeon he'd ever served with. Who'd visited her once after her medical discharge and never came back because looking at each other hurt too much, 2 warriors who'd survived the war but not the coming home. Through the helicopter window, Seattle disappeared beneath them, swallowed by mountains and clouds that looked like fists. The Blackhawk bucked in the turbulence, and Clara's hand instinctively found the grab handle, her knuckles white against the nylon webbing. Ma'am? Chen was watching her. You good? No. The last time she'd been in a helicopter heading toward gunfire, she'd been whole. Both knees functional, both hands steady, her mind uncomplicated by the weight of knowing that bodies broke in ways that couldn't be fixed, that sometimes keeping people alive just meant they suffered longer, that the difference between hero and corpse was often nothing more than a medic's skill and God's cruel arithmetic. The turbulence worsened, the Black Hawk dropped 50 feet in a wind shear, and suddenly Clara wasn't in the Cascades anymore. She was in Kandahar, in a CH-47 that had taken an RPG through the tail rotor, spinning like a bullet, the pilot screaming coordinates that didn't matter because they were already falling, already dying, already. The helicopter shuddered, her heart hammered against her ribs. Breathe, count, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, but the memories had teeth now. She saw the Humvee burning, saw Private Morrison's face, 20 years old with a piece of shrapnel through his femoral artery, bleeding out faster than she could clamp, his blood hot on her hands while she screamed for evac and knew it wouldn't come in time. Saw herself afterward, sitting in the shower fully clothed, watching Morrison's blood spiral down the drain and wondering why she'd survived when 19 other people hadn't. The moment her knees shattered, not from enemy fire, but from her own body giving out after 72 straight hours of surgery, collapsing mid-procedure, the bone fragmenting like her career, like her identity, like everything she'd built herself into. Angel 6. Thorne's voice cut through the spiral. He was looking at her with eyes that had seen combat stress before, that knew the difference between fear and trauma. I need to know if you're mission capable. The question was fair. The answer mattered. Clara looked down at her hands, steady now, the tremor gone. She'd spent 4 years trying to forget what these hands could do. 4 years pretending she was broken because staying broken meant staying safe, meant never having to face the moment when she'd have to choose between her trauma and someone else's life. But Rix was dying in a box canyon, and she was the only one who could save him. I'm capable, Captain. Her voice was iron. Let's go get our people. The blizzard hit them at 8,000 feet. One moment Clara could see the jagged peaks of the Cascades cutting through cloud cover. The next, the world turned white, a wall of snow and ice that swallowed the Black Hawk whole. The helicopter bucked and yawed, fighting winds that wanted to slam them into the mountainside. Razor 1 to all units, visibility 0. Switching to instruments only. Through the window, Clara caught glimpses of the second Black Hawk, a dark shadow materializing and vanishing in the storm like a ghost. Below, somewhere in that white chaos, was the Devil's Throat. And Rix. The crew chief yanked the door open. Arctic wind screamed into the cabin, stealing breath, bringing with it the smell of burning metal and gunpowder. Clara clipped her D-ring to the fast rope, her fingers moving with the automaticity of training that never died. 30 seconds. Thorne's voice in her headset. Hostiles are active. You'll be taking fire the moment you're visible. Clara looked down into the whiteout. Couldn't see the ground. Couldn't see the rope's end. Couldn't see anything except the void that had swallowed her career 4 years ago, waiting to swallow the rest of her. You don't have to do this, the voice whispered. You could tell them your knee won't hold. Tell them you're not ready. Stay safe. Below, a Marine was dying. Her Marine. 10 seconds. The rope deployed, snaking down into the white. Chen went first, dropping into nothing like it was routine. Davies followed. Then Thorne turned to her, his hand on her shoulder. On my mark, Major. Not nurse. Not Holloway. Major. Go. Clara gripped the rope and stepped into the void. The descent was vertical chaos. Wind slamming her into a spin, the rope burning through her gloves, her medical pack a pendulum trying to throw her off balance. She dropped through 50 feet of whiteout, 70, 100, her legs locked around the rope, her rebuilt knee screaming. First bullet passed close enough to feel. The crack of gunfire erupted from somewhere in the white, 3-round bursts, the disciplined shooting of professionals. Muzzle flashes strobed through the storm like lightning. Clara kept sliding, faster now, racing the bullets to ground that she still couldn't see. The impact came sudden and brutal, her boots hitting frozen earth, her knee buckling, her body rolling behind cover that materialized as the burned-out hull of the Osprey. Return fire erupted around her, Thorne's team engaging targets she couldn't see. Angel 6, you hit? Chen's voice, urgent, negative. Clara forced herself up, her knee protesting but holding. She took in the scene with combat-trained efficiency. The Osprey had gone down hard, nose crumpled against the canyon wall, one wing sheared off, the tail section a twisted sculpture of torn metal. Bullet holes stitched across the fuselage. The cargo ramp was half open, and through the gap she could see bodies. Some moving, some not. A Marine appeared from behind a boulder, young, maybe 23, his face gray with stress and cold. Corporal Hayes, the medic. Blood covered his hands up to the elbows. Major Holloway? He looked like he might cry with relief. Thank God. Commander Ricks is inside, ma'am. I've got him on 2 units of blood, but he's got a sucking chest wound and I think his aorta's been clipped. He keeps coding and I keep bringing him back, but I don't know how many more times. Show me. Clara was already moving toward the wreck, staying low, her medical pack clutched against her chest. The interior of the Osprey was a nightmare rendered in red and shadow. 7 Marines in various states of injury, broken bones, lacerations, one with burns covering half his face. Emergency chem lights cast everything in a sickly green glow, and in the back, surrounded by blood-soaked gauze and empty IV bags, was Commander Daniel Ricks. He looked smaller than she remembered, older, gray at the temples, new lines around his eyes. But when he saw her, recognition flickered through the pain. Clara? His voice was a whisper. That really you, or am I already dead? She knelt beside him, her hands finding his carotid pulse, thready, rapid, weakening. His chest wall showed the telltale flutter of paradoxical movement. Flail chest, hemothorax, and based on the amount of blood Hayes had transfused, internal bleeding that wouldn't stop without surgical intervention. Outside, gunfire intensified, an explosion shook the wreck, grenade or RPG, close enough to rain debris. Clara looked into Rick's eyes, the man who'd taught her that leadership meant being the first one in and the last one out, that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the decision that something else mattered more. I'm here, Commander. She pulled on sterile gloves, her hands rock steady now. And I'm not losing you. Even if it meant doing the impossible. Even if it meant cracking his chest open in the back of a crashed aircraft while mercenaries tried to kill them all. Clara's hands moved before her mind could catalog the impossibilities. Hayes, I need light. All of it. She was already unzipping her pack, pulling out instruments that gleamed dully in the chem light glow. Chen, get on his left side. You're going to maintain C-spine stabilization. Davies, I need you managing blood products. Ma'am, we only have 2 units left. Then make them count. Clara's voice cut like a scalpel. She positioned herself over Rick's chest, her fingers palpating ribs, counting spaces, finding the exact location where she needed to cut. Commander, I'm going to perform a thoracotomy. You're going to feel pressure. Stay with me. Rick's eyes locked on hers, pupils blown wide with shock. Always was better at giving orders than taking them. Start now. She looked at Hayes. Ketamine, 50 milligrams IV push. The medication went in. Rick's eyelids fluttered but didn't close, not enough dosage to fully anesthetize, just enough to dull the horror of what was about to happen. Clara picked up the scalpel. The first incision was diagonal, following the 5th intercostal space, cutting through skin and muscle with the confidence of someone who'd done this in worse conditions. Blood welled immediately, hot against her cold fingers. An RPG screamed overhead. The explosion rocked the Osprey, showering them with debris. The chem lights swung wildly, turning the surgery into a strobe-lit nightmare. Clara didn't flinch, her hands kept cutting. Rib spreader. Hayes slapped it into her palm, his movements mechanical with stress. Clara positioned the medieval-looking device between Rick's ribs and began cranking. The sound was obscene, cartilage popping, bone creaking, a man's chest being forced open while his heart still beat inside. Rick's made a sound that wasn't quite human. Stay with me, Commander. Clara's voice was iron wrapped in velvet. You've survived worse than this. Liar, he gasped. The rib spreader locked open. Clara's hands entered the thoracic cavity, warm, slick, a landscape of anatomy she knew better than her own face. The lung was collapsed, deflated like a punctured tire. And beneath it, pumping weakly, was Rick's heart. I've got massive hemothorax, at least 2 liters. Her fingers probed deeper, following the blood to its source. There, intercostal artery tear and, Jesus, what? Hayes' voice cracked. What is it? Aortic nick. Small, maybe 2 millimeters, but it's bleeding into the chest cavity. Clara's mind raced through options, all of them bad. In a hospital, this would require a cardiothoracic surgeon, a bypass machine, a team of specialists. Here, she had her hands and whatever instruments fit in a pack. And about 4 minutes before Rick's bled out completely. Gunfire erupted closer now, just outside the Osprey. Thorne's voice shouted coordinates. Someone screamed. A body hit the ground hard enough to shake the wreck. Vascular clamp. The Debaki. Clara's voice didn't waver even as bullets punched through the fuselage above her head, ricocheting off metal with sounds like angry hornets. Hayes handed her the clamp. She navigated it through the chest cavity, past the lung, past the heart, following the aorta down to where blood pulsed from a tear no bigger than a pinhole but deadly as a gunshot. The clamp's jaws closed. The bleeding stopped. Rick's blood pressure immediately stabilized on the monitor Hayes had rigged. But Clara knew this was temporary, a battlefield fix, not a solution. The clamp was buying time, maybe an hour, maybe two. After that, tissue damage, thrombosis, organ failure. Davies, start the last unit of blood. Clara was already preparing sutures, her movements economical, precise. Hayes, prep for chest tube insertion. We need to evacuate this blood before. The explosion came from directly outside. The Osprey lurched sideways, metal shrieking. Clara's hands stayed inside Rick's chest, cradling his aorta like it was made of glass. The world tilted, equipment crashed, someone shouted a warning. Through the cargo ramp, Clara saw it, an RPG team, 2 mercenaries positioned on the canyon rim, the launcher already being reloaded. And the extraction Black Hawk hovering directly in their kill zone, lowering a rescue basket. Thorne appeared at the ramp, his rifle tracking targets. Angel 6, we need to move now. They're flanking our position. I'm holding his aorta in my hand, Captain. Clara's voice was preternaturally calm. If I let go, he's dead in 90 seconds. If we stay, we're all dead in 5 minutes. The math was brutal and simple. Save Ricks and possibly lose everyone. Evacuate now and definitely lose Ricks. Clara looked down at the man who'd taught her what it meant to be a Marine. His eyes were open, watching her, understanding the calculation she was making. Leave me, Ricks whispered. That's an order, Major. Clara's jaw set. With respect, Commander, go to hell. Her hands moved with impossible speed. She packed the chest cavity with gauze, pressure and prayer holding what the clamp couldn't. Hayes, help me get him in the basket. Chen, Davies, you're carrying him. Move like his life depends on it, because it does. They lifted Rick's as one. Clara's hand still inside his chest, her body moving with theirs, a grotesque dance toward the basket swaying in the rotor wash. The RPG team fired. The rocket screamed past, close enough to feel its heat. And Clara Holloway, who'd spent 4 years being invisible, stepped fully into the light. The basket jammed at 70 feet. Clara felt it through the cable, a metallic grinding, a shudder, then nothing. The winch had stopped. They hung suspended between earth and sky, spinning slowly in the rotor wash. Rick strapped in the basket with Clara crouched over him, one hand still managing the clamp on his aorta, the other gripping the cable. RAZOR1, basket is stuck. Thorne's voice crackled through the comms. Winch mechanism frozen, ice in the gears. Below them, muzzle flashes erupted from 3 positions. Bullets snapped through the air, pinging off the basket's metal frame. Clara curled her body over Rick's, making herself a human shield, feeling the impacts vibrate through the steel beneath her. Clara, Rick's voice was fading. Get out, climb up, save yourself. Not happening, Commander. The basket spun again, and Clara saw them, the RPG team on the canyon rim, already reloading. The gunner was tracking their position, adjusting for wind and distance. She had maybe 30 seconds before the next rocket turned them both into pink mist. Her Sig Sauer was in her thigh holster. Her hand was inside a man's chest. The math was impossible. Hayes, Clara's voice cut through the chaos. In my pack, morphine auto-injector, left pocket. The young medic appeared at the basket's edge, clinging to the cable, his face white with terror and determination. He found the injector, pulled it free. Give Rick's 10 milligrams, then take over the clamp. Ma'am, I can't. I don't have the training to. You do now. On my mark, you're going to slide your hand in next to mine, feel for the clamp, and maintain pressure exactly where my fingers are. If you let go, if you slip, he dies. Understand? Hayes nodded, his jaw set. Clara pulled her hand slowly from the chest cavity, guiding Hayes' fingers in, feeling him find the clamp, watching his eyes go wide as he understood the fragile machinery of life he was now responsible for. Good. Don't move, don't breathe wrong, just hold. She freed her right hand, slick with Rick's blood, and drew the Sig Sauer. The RPG team was 70 yards away and 40 feet above them, an upward angle shot while hanging from a spinning basket in a blizzard. The kind of shot that existed only in Hollywood or nightmares. Clara had made harder shots in Kandahar. She braced her forearm against the basket's rim, her rebuilt knee screaming as she shifted her weight, finding the biomechanics of stability in a world that refused to be still. The SIG's sights aligned. She exhaled halfway, held it, let her heartbeat slow despite the bullets snapping past her head. The RPG gunner lifted the launcher to his shoulder. Clara squeezed the trigger 3 times. The first shot missed, wind drift, the basket's rotation throwing her aim. The second shot hit the launcher itself, sparking off metal. The third shot punched through the gunner's chest. He dropped, the RPG clattering from his hands, tumbling down the canyon wall. But his partner was already moving, scooping up the launcher, trying to finish what his friend had started. Clara fired again. The SIG's magazine emptied, 15 rounds sent into the storm, most of them swallowed by White, but enough finding their target. The second mercenary staggered, dropped to one knee, raised the launcher anyway because dying men could still kill. RAZOR1, I need that winch operational now. Working on it, Angel 6, 10 seconds. They didn't have 10 seconds. The mercenary's finger found the trigger. Clara saw it happening in slow motion, the backblast, the rocket leaving the tube, the smoke trail carving through the blizzard directly at them. She twisted, trying to shield Rix with her body, knowing it wouldn't matter, knowing they were both already dead. The winch engaged. The basket jerked upward with bone-rattling force, rising 5 feet in a fraction of a second. The RPG passed beneath them, so close Clara felt the heat against her boots, and detonated against the canyon wall in a bloom of orange fire. The shockwave hit like a physical blow, slamming the basket sideways. Hayes screamed, his hand slipping from the clamp. Clara lunged, her bloody fingers finding his wrist, steadying him, keeping him inside Rick's chest even as the world tried to shake them all into the void. Hold him. Clara's voice was raw. Whatever happens, you hold that clamp. The basket rose faster now, reeling them in, the Blackhawk's crew chief reaching down with hands that Clara grabbed like lifelines. They hauled her aboard first, then Hayes, still attached to Rick's like an umbilical cord, then the basket itself, dragging the commander into the helicopter's belly. The door gunner opened up, suppressing fire raking the canyon as the Blackhawk banked hard and climbed, trading altitude for speed, escaping the devil's throat the way fallen angels escaped hell. Burning, bloody, alive, Clara collapsed against the bulkhead, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing, her knee a symphony of pain. Beside her, Hayes was crying and laughing simultaneously, his hand still inside Rick's chest, still holding the clamp. I got him, the young medic gasped. Oh God, I got him, I didn't let go. You did good, Corporal. Clara's voice was hoarse. You did really good. Rick's eyes opened, just a crack, just enough to find her face. Show off, he whispered, and despite everything, the blood, the trauma, the impossibility of what they'd just survived, Clara Holloway smiled. Blackhawk touched down at Seattle General 43 minutes later. Clara had spent every second of that flight keeping Rix alive, managing his vitals, adjusting the clamp, talking him through the pain with a voice that had guided dying men through worse. Hayes had finally been able to remove his hand from the chest cavity when they'd stabilized at altitude, but the temporary repair was degrading. They had maybe 20 minutes before the clamp failed or a clot formed or Rick's heart simply gave up. The helicopter hadn't even fully landed when Clara kicked the door open. I need a gurney, a trauma team, and an OR prepped for emergency thoracic surgery. Her voice carried across the ambulance bay like a whip crack. Move. Nurses appeared, then stopped, staring at the woman who'd left as their invisible colleague and returned as something else entirely. Her scrubs were soaked black with blood. Her hands looked like she'd bathed them in it. Her face was streaked with gunpowder and ice. She looked like war. Now, Clara's roar broke their paralysis. The gurney materialized. They transferred Rix with practiced efficiency, Clara's hands never leaving the area around his chest, monitoring, adjusting, keeping him in the narrow window between life and death. She burst through the doors like an invading force. The waiting room fell silent. Jenkins dropped her clipboard, Marcus backed against the wall. And standing at the nurse's station, looking like he'd just seen a ghost armed with a scalpel, was Dr. Adrian Prescott. Trauma 1, clear it now. Clara didn't break stride, the gurney rolling ahead of her like a battering ram. I need 2 units O negative, a cardiothoracic tray, and someone page Dr. Morrison from surgery. Tell him it's an aortic repair and he's got 10 minutes to scrub in. The staff scattered, responding to the authority in her voice with the automatic obedience that command presence demanded. Blackhawk touched down at Seattle General 43 minutes later. Clara had spent every second of that flight keeping Rix alive, managing his vitals, adjusting the clamp, talking him through the pain with a voice that had guided dying men through worse. Hayes had finally been able to remove his hand from the chest cavity when they'd stabilized at altitude, but the temporary repair was degrading. They had maybe 20 minutes before the clamp failed or a clot formed or Rick's heart simply gave up. The helicopter hadn't even fully landed when Clara kicked the door open. "I need a gurney, a trauma team, and an OR prepped for emergency thoracic surgery." Her voice carried across the ambulance bay like a whip crack. "Move." Nurses appeared, then stopped, staring at the woman who'd left as their invisible colleague and returned as something else entirely. Her scrubs were soaked black with blood. Her hands looked like she'd bathed them in it. Her face was streaked with gunpowder and ice. She looked like war. Now, Clara's roar broke their paralysis. The gurney materialized. They transferred Rick's with practiced efficiency, Clara's hands never leaving the area around his chest, monitoring, adjusting, keeping him in the narrow window between life and death. She burst through the doors like an invading force. The waiting room fell silent. Jenkins dropped her clipboard, Marcus backed against the wall. And standing at the nurse's station, looking like he'd just seen a ghost armed with a scalpel, was Dr. Adrian Prescott. Trauma 1, clear it now. Clara didn't break stride, the gurney rolling ahead of her like a battering ram. "I need 2 units O negative, a cardiothoracic tray, and someone page Dr. Morrison from surgery. Tell him it's an aortic repair and he's got 10 minutes to scrub in." The staff scattered, responding to the authority in her voice with the automatic obedience that command presence demanded. Prescott stepped forward, his white coat pristine, his face a mask of affronted dignity. "Holloway, you can't just storm in here and start giving orders. There are protocols, chains of command." Clara stopped, looked at him, and in her eyes was something that made him go quiet. "This man has a 2mm nick in his descending aorta that I've temporarily clamped with a debaki in a field environment. He's lost approximately 40% of his blood volume. His chest is currently packed with gauze because I performed a thoracotomy in the back of a crashed aircraft while people were actively trying to kill us." Her voice was surgical steel. "So unless you want to explain to the Pentagon why a Marine commander died because you were worried about protocols, I suggest you scrub in and assist. I'm not a cardiothoracic surgeon. Neither am I, but I've done 17 aortic repairs in combat conditions, and you've got 2 hands and presumably some knowledge of human anatomy." Clara leaned closer. "Unless your medical degree was just for show." The watching staff didn't breathe. Prescott's face cycled through several shades of red. "You have no authority to." "Captain Thorne." Clara didn't take her eyes off Prescott. The Marine appeared at her shoulder, still in full tactical gear, his presence filling the hallway like a thunderstorm. "If this physician refuses to assist in a military medical emergency, what's the protocol?" "Federal jurisdiction supersedes civilian authority, ma'am. I can place him under military order or arrest him for obstruction." Thorne's hand rested casually on his sidearm. His choice. The silence stretched like wire. Prescott looked at Clara, really looked at her for the first time. Saw not the limping nurse he'd dismissed, not the diversity hire he'd mocked, but the combat surgeon who'd just performed battlefield miracles. Saw the blood on her hands that belonged to a man she'd carried back from hell on pure will and skill. Saw someone who'd always been better than him and had simply chosen not to prove it until it mattered. "Fine." The word came out strangled. "I'll assist." "Good." Clara was already moving again, the gurney rolling into Trauma 1. "Jenkins, Marcus, you're with me. Hayes, get yourself checked out and debriefed. Chen, Davies, someone get you hot coffee and a warm room." She snapped on fresh gloves, her movements precise despite the exhaustion threatening to pull her under. Ricks was transferred to the trauma table, monitors beeping their urgent symphony. His blood pressure was dropping again, the clamp was failing. "Prescott, left side, you're going to retract and suction." Clara positioned herself over the open chest cavity. "When I remove the clamp, there will be approximately 3 seconds before he exsanguinates. I need to visualize the tear, place a horizontal mattress suture, and clamp again before he codes. Your job is to keep the field clear so I can see. Think you can handle that?" Prescott's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "On my count." Clara's fingers found the clamp, steadied it, prepared for the moment of truth. Around her, the trauma bay held its breath. Jenkins ready with sutures, Marcus managing the blood transfusion, a room full of people watching a woman who'd spent 4 years being invisible finally let them see what she truly was. 3, 2, 1. She released the clamp, and Major Clara Holloway, Angel 6, did the impossible one more time. Surgery took 4 hours. Clara's hands never faltered, placing sutures that would hold a man's life together, repairing tissue that had been ravaged by metal and velocity and the simple cruelty of physics. Prescott assisted in silence, his role reduced to following her instructions with mechanical precision, watching a level of surgical skill he'd probably never witness again. When Rick's chest was finally closed, his vitals stable, his heart beating strong and steady on the monitor, Clara stripped off her gloves and walked out of the OR without a word. She found a supply closet, closed the door, and let herself shake. The adrenaline crash hit like a freight train, her hands trembling, her rebuilt knee finally giving up its pretense of function, her body remembering every impossible thing she'd asked it to do in the last 6 hours. She slid down the wall, sitting on the cold tile, and for exactly 90 seconds allowed herself to be human. Then she stood up, straightened her blood-stained scrubs, and walked back into the world. The had transformed in her absence. Military personnel filled the hallways, officers in dress uniforms, Marines in combat fatigues, enough brass to start a foundry. At the center of it all stood a woman in her 60s wearing 3 stars on her shoulders and an expression that could command armies. General Rachel Sterling, commander of SOCOM. The staff had formed an impromptu audience, pressed against walls and doorways, sensing they were witnessing something historic. Sterling's voice carried like artillery. Major Clara Holloway. Clara limped forward, no point hiding it anymore, no point pretending to be less than she was. She stopped at attention, military bearing overtaking 4 years of civilian posture. General, I've been reading Captain Thorne's after-action report. Sterling held up a tablet. It makes for interesting reading. Field thoracotomy under fire, aortic repair in a crashed aircraft, elimination of hostile forces while performing medical triage, and I understand you've just completed a successful surgical intervention on Commander Ricks. Yes, ma'am, the same Commander Ricks whose medical evaluation board recommended your discharge 4 years ago. Sterling's eyes were sharp enough to cut. The same board that decided a knee injury made you unfit for continued service. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Clara said nothing. That board was wrong. Sterling stepped closer. You were never broken, Major. You were healing. There's a difference. Something cracked in Clara's chest, something that had been holding her together with scar tissue and shame. The military doesn't just need soldiers who can fight, Sterling continued. We need soldiers who can come back from the edge and still choose to serve. Who can be knocked down and get back up. Who understand that strength isn't the absence of injury, it's what you do with the injury you've received. The general reached into her jacket and pulled out a small box. Major Clara Holloway, by order of the Secretary of Defense and in recognition of extraordinary valor in combat operations, you are hereby promoted to the rank of colonel. She opened the box, revealing the Silver Eagles. Additionally, you are being offered command of the newly formed Joint Combat Surgical Response Team, a rapid deployment unit that will provide surgical support in hostile environments worldwide. The erupted in applause, Marines, nurses, even Prescott, though his clapping was slow and mechanical. Clara stared at the Eagles, her vision blurring. I'm offering you your life back, Sterling said quietly, for Clara's ears only. The question is, are you ready to take it? Clara thought about the last 4 years. Thought about every shift where she'd swallowed her expertise, every moment she'd made herself small, every time she'd limped through these halls pretending her limp was all she was. Thought about Rick's eyes in the back of that Osprey, looking at her like she was still the surgeon he remembered, the leader he'd trained, the warrior who'd earned her call sign in blood and skill. Thought about the motorcycle victim who'd died because she'd stayed silent. Yes, ma'am, Clara's voice was clear. I'm ready. Sterling pinned the Eagles on Clara's blood-stained scrubs, a surreal image, colonel's rank on fabric that looked like it had survived a war zone. Because it had. Your team is being assembled as we speak, Sterling said. You'll have full authority to recruit personnel, set protocols, and deploy as needed. Your first mission brief is in 72 hours. She paused. That gives you time to tie up loose ends here. Clara turned to face the staff. The people who'd worked beside her, ignored her, watched her be diminished and said nothing. Jenkins was crying. Marcus looked proud. The other nurses wore expressions ranging from awe to guilt. And Prescott stood apart, his face carefully neutral, his entire worldview having been dismantled in the span of a single day. Clara walked over to him. Dr. Prescott. Her voice was steady. You're a competent physician. But competence without humility is just arrogance, and arrogance kills patience. She held his gaze. That motorcycle victim this morning, his name was David Chen. He was 28, he had a daughter, and he died because you couldn't imagine that someone who didn't look like you might know more than you did.